Thank you all for being here today. It's great to see so many women in the audience. Go Female Broncos. I titled my presentation Women in Cybersecurity because that's a topic I have quite a bit of experience in. But actually, I'm hoping that the information that I convey to you today is information that anyone and everyone can use who has a passion for cyber and is thinking about a career in it. So it's empowering your success because there's so much that you can do on your own to build a foundation for success in the future. So as he mentioned, I'm a fellow Bronco. I graduated from Cal Poly Pomona in computer information systems about 100 years ago. And I've had the most amazing career. And so a lot of it started out in systems analysis and design. I never wrote a line of code, which is a good thing because I was never good at it. And then over the years, I went into managing and directing software systems application projects, managing big programs. I had always been in the defense and intelligence community. And then about 12 years ago, I got into cyber and information security and absolutely loved it because it could combine my software systems engineering background with the intelligence community. So lots of fun. So you are welcome to ask questions as we go along. Don't want you to sit there trying to remember it. So I'd like to be as interactive as possible. I do recognize there are people that are watching it through live streaming or will look at this later, but I'm just so happy to see so many smiling faces here. Okay, I give up. So a couple things, kind of setting the landscape for cyber and society, because that does impact your success. A little bit about how to build up your credentials, no matter where you are in your academic or career journey right now. And then different things about career pathways, because as you could probably guess, there are a lot of varied pathways. And then wrapping up at the end. So cyber in society. I know it's hard for digital natives to imagine that we didn't always have, children born with an iPad in their hands. And, but not everybody has that kind of a background. And when you look at the impact of cyber on our society now, I honestly cannot think of any element of our lives that doesn't have some kind of an intersection with cyber. You think about the personal things that happen and the possibility of your personally identifiable information getting hacked, or social media accounts being hacked all the time. Think about private industry. Companies spend a lot of money protecting their intellectual property because they've spent money creating it. And that's how they make money. So they have to protect their most critical assets. I think of the pipeline hack that we had a year and a half ago, and the Colonial Pipeline got shut down when their control systems were hacked. That goes into sort of public infrastructure, although it's private, but it certainly impacts the delivery of petroleum products, the largest pipeline in the US. And then think about the electrical grid, and think about nuclear power plants whose control systems are all online. There's a lot of possibility for threat. And then an area where I spent a lot of time is in national security. I cannot imagine how it would pan out if our adversaries ever got a hold of our troop deployment or movement of our equipment. I mean, that would be terrible. I mean, plans for high technology programs have to remain protected. And that's where the cyber profession comes in. Our job is to protect an organization's most critical information and assets. So you partner this with the evolving threat in the landscape. So cyber attacks, more frequent, right? You hear a lot more of them. They're a lot more destructive. I mean, it's not just like, haha, let me see if I can break into somebody's Facebook page. It's, let me see if I can take all the money out of their banking account. You know, it's much more destructive. And even on a national level, let me see if I can take down an entire country's government. And so it's much more destructive, but it's also cheaper. The very low barriers to entry. You can buy, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but you can buy all kinds of cyber tools and capabilities on the dark web that could launch an attack for very little money. You don't need to know a lot. That's why our cyber professionals need to know more, is to stay a step ahead of people who are new to this and nefarious acts. But I think that, you know, the bottom line is there are so many opportunities if you have an interest in a profession in cyber, in a career in cyber, that you can pursue. So let's talk a little bit about some of those. Bad news, the gap between the supply and the demand is huge. So if you look at the ISC squared cybersecurity study, and they update it every couple of years, it's from the most recent, you know, there were millions of not only unfilled jobs. So a company says, you know, I have 5 requisitions for cyber openings, but I really need 15 more people to do a decent job of protecting my assets. So these guys count 15. How many do we really need to protect, as well as we would like to, our most critical assets? So look at that number, 2.72. 2.72 million people we need to protect and defend our critical assets and infrastructure. So what does that mean for you? Well, actually, that number's gone down. The gap was bigger last year. In the last year, 700,000 people went into the cyber profession. Doesn't necessarily mean they're cyber professionals, because they come from all over the place to join the cyber profession, which creates a little more pressure on those of you who are looking to have a career in cyber. You have to distinguish yourself. So largely, it is a field that is still woefully short of women. Only 25% of the cyber workforce is women. So why is that still? When I was a student here, there were very few women in any of my classes. And I suspect there's a lot more now than there used to be. And that shift is getting better. But the bottom line is, we have really complex problems in cyber. It takes a real diversity of thought, of problem solving, of approach, of perspective, of education, of background, of experience, of education, to come up with the best possible solutions for those complex problems. So this is a field where we really cannot afford to leave anyone out. And that's why people who are coming either non-IT backgrounds or maybe entirely different disciplines can find a job in cyber, because the need is so great for that diversity on our project teams and our solutioning teams. So those entering the workforce now, you might think, great, you know, there's a lot of jobs open, you know, right out here in the Inland Empire or in Southern California. But it isn't that way anymore. With so many jobs open, people are saying, heck, you know, I always wanted to live in Montana on a lake in the middle of nowhere. And guess what? There's a lot of cyber jobs where you can do it remotely. So you're now competing for those same jobs with people who are from outside the area or outside the country. So this is a very mobile workforce. and they're going to go where the jobs are, or go where they can get the best opportunity for advancement and learning. And they can go find something that's entirely remote or hybrid or in person. Again, cyber offers such a diversity of opportunity that there's a lot of competition. So something to think about is, that workforce is coming from everywhere. But sadly, we don't have as many students who are choosing to go into science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM disciplines. And we saw that even more exacerbated during COVID, where math scores and even communication, English skills scores were going down in standardized tests. These are difficult subjects, and it's even more difficult when you're at home by yourself looking at your computer screen. So we're losing our competitive edge compared to the rest of the world. So if the workforce that you're competing with is coming from all over and we're losing our traction as a nation, that's not good. So a lot of what we need to do is, thankfully, we have a lot of middle school, high school students here enjoying the cyber fair today, getting that spark of excitement to pursue the STEM disciplines and think about cyber as what they want to do. But there's good news. There's good news. So much has been happening to prepare a workforce and educate our folks in cyber over the last, I would say 10 years, but this seems to have really accelerated as people read those studies and realize there's millions of jobs open. So at the K through 12 level, there are a lot of schools now that are requiring the students take classes to build up their digital acumen. They want them to know the basics of computing, the basics of cyber. A lot of academic institutions are saying, hey, you got to know how to protect your information out there when it's in public. And they're trying to instill that much more. I mean, I was in Saudi Arabia several years ago and speaking to 7th grade girls. Every single one of them had at least one social media account and one mobile device, and not a single one of them had ever heard of cyber. They just put their lives out there in social media, and it's scary. So thankfully, we're getting better at that. And academic institutions, colleges, universities, really putting together some creative academic programs, degree programs, certification-based programs, lots more out there. And then you look at government organizations, not only government agencies that are responsible for protecting our infrastructure, like Department of Homeland Security or CISA, but also agencies that use cyber and combined with their main mission, like law enforcement. And we think about the FBI and cyber crimes and digital forensics analysis, and those great dogs that are out there that sniff for digital storage devices. So there are a lot of federal organizations that have an element in cyber where they hire cyber professionals. And there have been a lot, especially in the last 5 years, legislation and executive orders at the federal level, which talk to things like cyber education, co-ops, internships, apprenticeships. So a lot of more infrastructure is being built that promotes cyber education. And then there's a lot of wonderful public-private partnerships and nonprofit organizations that are pulling together boot camps and summer-long training classes or certification-focused programs. So there's a lot more opportunity to learn in order to close that big gap. So when you think about getting into the cyber profession, isn't just going to a 4-year institution and getting a computer science degree, lots of different ways to build skills. So let's talk about enhancing your credentials. So some of my time in private industry was building up a cyber workforce. What the heck does that mean? And I talked to the new Space Force when they were first stood up. They said, well, we need a cyber workforce, and we're not quite sure how to do that. So I talked to them. There's some interesting characteristics that are helpful if you're thinking about a career in cyber. And I kind of think of it in 3 different pieces. Your technical capabilities or credentials. So I always think that a background in science, technology, engineering, and math is a good thing as a foundation, but that depends on what area of cyber you want to go into. You combine that with really, really important critical thinking, problem solving, able to analyze massive amounts of information and distill it into problem solving and then turn it into synthesis into other areas. So these kinds of things, analysis, critical thinking, really important, really important. And you develop those frequently in STEM disciplines, because that's how you approach, you know, the engineering, problem solving, life cycle kind of thing. And then I think about behavioral. Look at these. Intellectual curiosity. You know, when you're in cyber, a lot of things you'll be looking at in your profession have never been looked at before. A new threat comes along that no one's ever seen before. How do you address that? It's not going to be by something that you learned in college. It's going to be that what you learned in college was critical thinking and learning how to learn and how to problem solve. So intellectual curiosity, why does that happen that way? Where did that threat come from? What might be behind this? And then various decisions. Look at all of these other ones, just thinking differently, because that's what those of us in cyber do. We think differently. We look at a problem a different way. And the value of this is when you get a diverse team of people together and they have different academic and experience and perspectives and social backgrounds, they just look at things differently. Every single individual is critical. They each bring something critical to solve the puzzle. So that's why your ability to work in teams, small and large, is so important. I can't think of too many times in my career when I sat in my office or my cubicle all by myself and was solving problems. You do that with other people, and your ability to work well with other people is so critical in cyber, because again, it goes back to working with diverse folks to solve critical, complex problems. Determination and persistence. I would oftentimes go to our cybersecurity operations center, and I worked for a corporation of 90,000 employees with operations worldwide. And there were about 6 billion bits of traffic coming through our ops center every day. And so you might see something fly by and you go, well, that's interesting. And so you start capturing pieces, and you use Splunk to help you do some ferreting down to the most critical pieces. And then you got to stick with it until you figure out what the heck is going on and how to stop it from happening again. A determination to figure out what's going on. It's like sort of like the intellectual curiosity. And then personal. This is a big part of it, because when you are in the cyber profession, your job, remember, protecting, defending the most critical assets the organization owns. So they're counting on you as an individual to have high ethics and high integrity. And so you have to think of this profession as one that may require a security clearance or a background check, because they aren't going to let just anybody protect their important stuff. So integrity and ethics is important. And I would say a passion for what you do. You have to love it. You have to like it, at least, because it's every day, you know? And so a passion is what keeps you going, back to the persistence, but good lifestyle choices. So when you're in security, people kind of expect you to approach things from a posture of security and protection, right? So you should be responsible with your own personal information and the way that you conduct yourself online. So good lifestyle choices. I'm not so sure you want to be that person with the Facebook page that shows you having, okay, maybe like a beer pong party and you're 17. Not a good lifestyle choice. Because pretty much everything is out there on the internet, and we know once it's there, it doesn't go away. So it could impact you and your choices at getting into a university, getting into the job of your choice. I personally found working in the defense and intelligence community very rewarding. I enjoyed that work a whole lot. It was very challenging, but it also meant that, you know, the government knows everything about my life since I was about 13. And so you just have to, if you want to be in that kind of a job, recognize the fact that people are going to dig into your background and want to know everything about you. And so you don't really want to give them a whole lot of stuff to look at. It's good to be boring, you know. So I don't know how many middle or high school students are online. I know there's some wandering around here. So I'm going to go through this one fairly quickly. But I mentioned that there's a lot of more opportunities out there for students to learn and grow even at the younger stages. And it's important, I think, for them to be aware of some of these opportunities, because the sooner you know if this might be a profession for you or not, the better. But it also helps you learn about the very different opportunities. So lots of things, and I think this applies actually to college students as well, many of these. So joining clubs, oh my gosh, there are phenomenal clubs here at Cal Poly Pomona in cyber. I mean, I was talking to the MISA folks, and they're doing some neat stuff with data analytics. And you see the FAST team and others here that really are doing some fascinating work. But that's, you know, for a long time, kids felt a little reluctant to get into cyber because they thought it was a bunch of nerds. Okay, well, we are a bunch of nerds, but we're cool nerds. And we've all found our community of nerdy friends that like this same stuff. And so that's really important, that you have communities of friends that you can learn from. And then I always tell students, you know, go volunteer, or if you can get paid, it's really a great gig, but, you know, work at the help desk or go support the IT department in something they may need. Or maybe there's an instructor or professor that, okay, not all professors are whiz bang at that cyber stuff. Maybe there's something you can do to help them, you know, if it's protecting student records or whatever it might be. But always look for opportunities. Because one thing I tell students is every opportunity is a chance to learn something new. And it might be something new about yourself. So take advantage of all of those. And then I used to run the Global Cyber Patriot youth education program. And that's great for middle school and high school students for competing. But this is where I think college students, and I know the Cal Poly Pomona students love this, mentoring middle school and high school teams. Go and visit a high school and talk to their student club about how cool cyber is. When you have to give a presentation, you will prepare yourself and you'll learn at the same time. So I don't know if they even do this anymore, but when I was a kid and I was in 6th grade, that was a long time ago, I used to get to go to the library and read to the kindergartners. So there's these books out there, you know, Sarah the Cyber Hero and Ben the Cyber, they're meant for pre-readers. Go to a school and talk to the kids, read the book to them and say, anybody ever know what cyber is? This is all in a language that's for their age, and talk to them about how cool it is. So there's a lot you can do. There are also materials for helping senior citizens understand cyber. and protecting their own information. So lots of cool stuff out there. And there are lots of other high school cyber competitions, you know, PICO, CTF, and basic capture the flag type activities that are designed just for middle school or high school students. So lots of opportunity to learn, but also to give back. I'll get that mouse wheel. So what about college? I think the majority of the audience here is students from various colleges in the area, plus Cal Poly Pomona, the host school. But again, join cyber clubs on campus. There's some great ones in the College of Engineering and in science. Lots are focused on, you know, girls in the cyber community, like She Codes or Girls Who Code. There's a lot of national level organizations like Women in Cybersecurity that offer things for college level students. There's a lot of affinity clubs as well. So if you want to join a club for women or Black engineers or the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, many of those have student chapters. So you might want to seek those out. So again, you could be in a community of like-minded folks who enjoy this. And then collegiate cyber competitions. And especially that's such good practice for working in teams, solving complex problems, communicating, all those things I talked about that are great skills to have. And there's lots of different ones. And, you know, as you guys probably know, Cal Poly Pomona is pretty exceptional in these competitions. It just did really well in Hive Strike. So lots of interesting things to look into. And, you know, there's so many materials online now that you can learn from. SANS Institute has lots of materials, lots of resources out there for building up your skill set. And the reason you want to do that is to distinguish yourself. Take one of those 2.72 million jobs out there, but you could bet there's probably 5 million people applying for them. So you need to make yourself stand out. And then cross-disciplinary activities. I bet you don't think about that, but maybe the Rose Float people need some cyber expertise. Because, you know, there's electronics in the Cal Poly float. It'd be really bad if those electronics were hacked from the sideline. Or think about maybe there's a engineering and they're working on unmanned vehicles. And, you know, there's a cyber component for taking over and controlling the communications with the vehicle. So there are other ways that you can get involved and share your expertise, but being involved with students in other disciplines on campus. Career pathways. Wow. Lots and lots of different career pathways now. So I mentioned there are people coming in from a variety of backgrounds. There are people who come in through psychology and sociology backgrounds that go into insider threat programs. And there are a handful of major software companies that develop insider threat software systems. So the opportunity to work with them and think about why would a person do that? How might they become an insider and threaten out the integrity of our systems and information? That was a fun project I got to work on at one point. But when you look at going through these academic levels, college is not for everyone. 4-year is not for everyone. And I'm seeing more students that start out on a 2-year and even get an associate's degree and combine it with certifications. But they quickly kind of realize once they're in the workforce, they're limited. So the more education you have, the more credentials you have, the more oomph you have under your belt, the better opportunities that will be available to you and the better opportunity to move up in your career and become more successful. So, you know, I would say go for whatever is comfortable for you, but look at here under bachelor's degree, look at those different kinds of degree programs that didn't exist 5 years ago. Think about supply chain management. I'll bet the people at retail companies wish they had better control over their supply chain, which, oh, by the way, the supplier hacked into our systems through the supplier portal. There's, and software engineering is pretty, typical IT, but look at law. I mentored a young lady who started in Cyber Patriot as a junior in high school. She wanted to be a communications major in college, and she did Cyber Patriot for 2 summers. She goes, I really kind of like this cyber stuff. She went to law school and now specializes in international cyber law, which is a fascinating area. Who would have thought? So there's a lot of different ways that you can enter the field. But one thing to keep in mind is don't let your entry point limit you. That's your entry point. That's where you discover what you like to do and the other things that exist out there. And then you can chart a different kind of a course if that's what you want to do. So there's this National Science Foundation has CyberCore. If you go to a CyberCore school, which Cal Poly Pomona is one, it means that they will pay for your education in exchange for working for them in a federal agency for a few years. And that's very popular. It's very affordable. It's a really neat way to enter the profession. Reserve Officer Training Command. So for students who might be interested in that and then be commissioned or not in the military once they graduate. And a start in IT is still the most common way that people enter the cyber field, but then you see some that are coming in from totally unrelated fields. And then this one I find interesting, explored cybersecurity concepts on their own. This goes back to the amount of information that's out there on the internet. You could take classes online. There are a lot of academic institutions that offer certification programs online, or SANS Institute, or any of those. So lots of different ways that you can enter the career field and also kind of chart your course. You don't know necessarily when you graduate where you want to end up. And so when I started in systems analysis and design, I was in that for 5 years, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And I got a good, strong foundation here at Cal Poly Pomona. And then I went into developing intelligence systems. So you could go a totally different direction and then ended up in cyber education and workforce. I will also tell you that the career you end up in probably does not exist today. The jobs that you will have 20 years from now probably do not exist today. So in Northrop Grumman, where I worked for 36 years, we were doing cyber long before it was called cyber. We called it information assurance or, data security or whatever. And then when you pull all the little pieces together and form it into cyber, it takes on a whole new meaning. And then there's all these career pathways and new jobs, and things just happen that way. So keep yourself kind of open-minded to the possibilities. I'm showing you the NICE workforce framework. NICE is the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, and it's put out by NIST, the National Institute of Science and Standards and Technology. And this is helpful because they've taken all of the bazillion things you could do in cyber and kind of distilled it into major workforce roles and categories. It's helpful for the federal government because if you're working at Department of Homeland Security and you're a cyber analyst 1 and you go over here and decide you want to work for the Treasury Department as a cyber analyst 1, it's apples to apples. But it is an interesting framework. I would encourage you to take a look at it and just see how they describe the cyber community and the different jobs. You definitely want to look for an employer who does stuff that you enjoy doing. I could never work for a social media company. I just don't care about that stuff. But man, you get me in a company that builds really high tech energy and weapon systems. That's cool. And so it needs to be a company who has a mission that resonates with you personally and makes a difference the way you want to make a difference in society. And then lots and lots of different pathways lead to your career, and you'll find what it is as you're going through it, and you'll discover. So keep yourself open-minded to discovering the opportunities, and you're gonna chart your course however it makes sense for you. But the neat thing about the cyber career is you can be sidestep and go up and come back, and your career path could be incredibly circuitous. So I would say, do what you can to distinguish yourself, build up your credentials, take advantage of all the information that's out there and available, take classes that sound interesting. Maybe it's not, first on your list of like, oh my God, a 7 o'clock class in programming, but you'll be happy later that you did that, because all of those things are an investment in you, and you need to invest in yourself and your credentials and your career, so it builds a foundation that you can use to make a difference in the world. So look for people who can help you identify and focus maybe on your strengths. What do you enjoy doing? What are you good at? And maybe what are the areas that you need to develop a little bit further? So find a mentor or find someone in your class that you're comfortable with, and you can explore things together. But think about your future academic plans, because your pathway could be different than anyone else's. You're unique. You got to have your own little career going on there. So they're varied and numerous. And I always tell people, say yes. When an opportunity comes along, say yes. I remember in 2010, I was sitting in my office and I got a call from an executive vice president who said, hey, Diane, it looks like we're going to sponsor this thing called Cyber Patriot. Do you want to be our point of contact? And I said, yeah, sure. What's Cyber Patriot? No, by the way, I already have a couple of full-time jobs. And that, yes, totally changed my career vector into doing something I had no idea was even available or on the radar. And I loved it. I loved those 10 or 12 or however many years it was running that program, because I took it global, and I could retire a year ago knowing that I exposed hundreds of thousands of kids to the joy of a cyber profession. And that's really what it's all about, is making a difference. So get out there, empower your career, make a difference, and invest in yourself. All right. Any questions? I kind of feel like a motivational speaker,
I have a question for you. If you started school right now, what part of cybersecurity would you be most interested in?
I think something at an architecture level. I tend to be a strategic thinker, and I do think differently than most people, but I think something in solutions architecture. That's a great question. Fun stuff. Everybody's different. I did learn collaboration early, because one of my classmates was really good at programming and I wasn't. He wasn't so good at big picture thinking, and we learned early how to collaborate.
Thank you, Diane, for a very insightful presentation based on your experience, very inspiring. As you reflect on your career, long career, impactful career, what advice could you give to our students, to our future cybersecurity professionals, on how to stay nimble in this rapidly changing technological world, and how to really be the long life learners? If you have any insights on that.
Great questions, Dean. I really think the question is about how you stay nimble. And that is a real challenge, but it's also a real asset in your career. And I think because the profession is changing so quickly, you should never aspire to know everything about cyber that's ever been, written. That isn't going to happen. But to stay nimble, a good skill is to learn how to learn. How do you learn? Do you learn better from a book, from a lecture, from watching a video? And always kind of stay up with things that interest you, and build a strong foundation of credentials so that you are able to be responsive when someone says, hey, you want to go run this program? Being adaptable to change is so critical in the cyber profession, because like I said, the profession you have 10 years from now is not going to exist now. So what can you do to be flexible, to be nimble, to be adaptable? And that's part of sort of the intellectual curiosity, is always kind of learning a little bit more here and there. So I think being nimble is absolutely critical. You had a second part to your question. I was so excited about the nimble thing. Oh, if you're not a lifelong learner, I don't know how you exist without being a lifelong learner. So I think one of the things about the Polytechnic experience here at Cal Poly Pomona is not that they are teaching you everything you will ever need to know. They're teaching you how to learn, right? And so the learning by every experience that you come across, what you see, what you do in a lab, every encounter with another person is an opportunity to learn. So that intellectual curiosity, that's what makes you a lifelong learner. You always, that persistence thing, what I put up there, those behavioral characteristics, always wondering why, and then going and try and figure it out. A lot of the, I'll call you digital natives, those born with an iPad, just will go look up anything on the internet. And I think that there's a lot of value in that, because information is so accessible now, and subject matter experts are so accessible now. Take advantage of that, because you will need to be a lifelong learner. You are not going to learn in college everything you will need to know in life. Learn from every opportunity.
We have time for one more question.
Did you guys get together and come up with tough questions?
We showed up here. So thank you so much for coming here, Diane. As many in the audience may or may not know, so I'm Allison Baskey, so Dean for Science, Interim for Engineering. I'm a physicist, so when I walk into rooms, I can oftentimes be the only woman in the room at conferences and so on. So since I do see a few women in the audience here, I just wanted you to share kind of what are your strategies when, yeah, you're the only one there, or if somebody isn't necessarily listening when your voice is in the room, and
You just ignore all those boys.
okay, just give some strategies here. And it's not just women, right? There are many underrepresented groups. And I just want to say one phrase I love to say, and again, differences drive innovation. We
That's
need
true.
all of these different brains in the room from different experiences, right?
And that's a great question, because I started out by saying, my subject says women in cybersecurity, but it really is that cybersecurity is one of those professions that requires diversity in order to be successful. So however you identify you as an individual, how value you're bringing to the solutions proposition, and you have to bring that forward. There will be detractors in every profession. There will be people who say, oh, you didn't go to an Ivy League school, so you don't know about that. Or you didn't have an internship, or you weren't exposed to this, or your socioeconomic upbringing didn't prepare you for that, or you don't have the resources, or. And what you have to do is invest in yourself and have that confidence and keep building your credentials so that you have the confidence and you can go into the room. I did frankly just ignore them. So yes, there were not very many women in my classes as a student. There were not very many women ever in my career. And when you combine a technology career and women, and you're moving up from analyst, senior analyst, to program manager, to manager and executive, I can tell you the higher up, there were fewer women,
there are few technology executive females out there. And so, you know, as you kind of move up that pyramid, there's even fewer and fewer. But you, if you have that, I'll call it executive presence, and it's that confidence you have in your capabilities and your knowledge, and you can share and exude that confidence, the people tend not to mess with you. You know, I never was one. There's always a lot of politics in business, and I wasn't ever very good at it because I was analytical. And so to me, it didn't make sense, you know. So I would say if you're prepared, always be prepared for whatever the task is. Always develop your credentials as best you can and be ready to be flexible and adaptable. And I think you'll earn the respect that you're due when you come to the table with an open mind and a willingness to work with others.
All right, let's give Diane a round of applause. Thank you.
At the end, I have this slide. So, and I know they're going to post them. So there's some links here to some really good resources you may want to check out.